Hi, welcome to another edition of the Alan Rosenberg Show. I think 2 days ago I did a video called No Sophomore Slump where I discussed second albums that I actually thought were better than their debut albums. And for my little channel, the video's done really well. So thank you so much. I think it's got like 600 views. That's a lot for my channel. So, but more importantly than the views is I got some really great comments. So thank you so much to my viewers who keep coming back and the new ones and writing me, and they're saying, yeah, you had some good choices, but you missed this and you missed this. Well, there's a lot to choose from. And again, the original video where, in my opinion, the second album was better than the first. But it's all subjective. So I came up with 38 more second albums that, in my opinion, are not better than the first, but they're damn close. Maybe they're equal, or maybe they're just slightly not as good. So I thought that would be an appropriate sequel to No Sophomore Slump, great second albums. So without further ado, let's do it in alphabetical order. You're going to see there's a different location because David and my other fans who like when my CDs crash, I really don't want these to crash. So I'm going to try to use a bigger table. We will see if this works because we're doing it live. So let's start with the letter A. And a bunch of people mentioned this one. I actually did think of it, but Aerosmith. And this is their debut album, which I like a lot. But a lot of people said, nah, the second album, Get Your Wings, which is that one, is a lot better. Not to me, but I think Get Your Wings is a really excellent album for sure. So let's put Aerosmith, Get Your Wings over there. I will say that the first Aerosmith album to me is a bit of a mishmash, and they really do start to sound like Aerosmith on that album, so I kind of get it. The next one is going to be this one. This is a twofer. This is a compilation called Beginnings, but this is the Allman Brothers Band, and of course their first two albums was the Allman Brothers, and the second one was Idle Wild South. They're really close in quality, but I think the edge still goes to the debut album. I'm going to fix the light in here so you can see it a little bit better, but there you go. But Idle Wild South is a great sequel. So let's stick that one over here for the Allman Brothers in alphabetical order next to Aerosmith. So we'll stick that one right there. And we'll keep going. Next up is going to be Bad Company. Their first album, the classic Bad Company album, which I think is amazing. And there it is. And that's a great album, but their sequel was mighty fine also, and that was Straight Shooter. And a lot of great hits on that album. I do not think it's as good as the debut, but it sure is an awesome record. So let's put Bad Company and Straight Shooter as a great second album as well. Let's see if this works out. If you were around in the 80s, Pat Benatar was the queen of rock and roll, and her debut was a great record, or a really good album. In the Heat of the Night had a bunch of hits, including her cover of I Need a Lover by John Mellencamp, and her version was the known version at that time. But her sequel was called Crimes of Passion, which was actually a bigger album. Treat Me Right, You Better Run, Hit Me With Your Best Shot, Hell Is for Children, her cover of Kate Bush's Wuthering Heights. This is a really, really awesome follow-up, and a lot of people might think it's better than the debut. It's close. Crimes of Passion from Pat Benatar. And a lot of people mentioned this album as a comment. No real argument for me, but I do got to say that I still prefer the debut album better, The Black Crowes. This is the debut album, and I think that's an amazing album. I was blown away when that album came out. I think it's great, but a lot of people, in fact, maybe most people, think their second album is even better, and that's the Southern Harmony and Musical Companion, a great record for sure. So a lot of people mention this. And no argument for me, but I prefer the debut, which is why I didn't make the first video. But there you go, the Black Crowes. Let's keep going. We are still in the letter B. Well, I don't know if you guys are going to see this. I really wasn't going to mention this one because for most people, I think their second album was considered a disappointment. But, of course, anything's going to be a disappointment after the debut Boston album. But Don't Look Back was a huge hit. I mean, it just wasn't on the level of the debut, but nothing was. But certainly the title track and A Man I'll Never Be is probably my favorite Boston song. So that's from the Boston album. Second one, Feeling Satisfied. It's a fine record. It just ain't the Boston album. But let's stick that over there. Let's see if people could see it a little bit. I don't know if people would ever think of this one, but this was a fine follow-up before my time. Of course, I got it much later on. This is the classic debut from the Buffalo Springfield, but their second album was called Buffalo Springfield Again. And this has got Mr. Soul on it, you know, that Neil Young classic. Child's Claim to Fame, Expecting to Fly, Rock and Roll Woman, Broken Arrow. A lot of great tracks. So that's a good choice for great second albums. Buffalo Springfield Again. A bunch of people mentioned this one. I knew it was going to show up. Of course, we're talking the Cars Candy-O, which is their second record. I didn't put it in the first video because I don't think it's as good as the debut album. And the debut album is one of the greatest debut albums of all time, almost like a classic. Every song on it is like a classic. But the second album was mighty fine with the title track. Just a Let's Go was a huge hit. Since I Held You, It's All I Can Do, Double Life. Yeah, this is a great, great follow-up. Candy-O from the Cars. Don't know if people think much about this one. Here's the original debut Cheap Trick album. Really good debut. But the second album was Cheap Trick in Color. And that was a fine follow-up. If you like Cheap Trick, you know, their first bunch of albums were great. You know, Hello There, Big Eyes, Drowned. It's got the studio version of I Want You to Want Me, a song that I've never been a really big fan of, but that's just me. Now, The Clash, one of my all-time favorite bands, and certainly my favorite punk band. You know, their debut album is just extraordinary, and there's two different versions of it. There's the US version and the UK version, and they're similar but different. When they did their second album, they had Sandy Pearlman of Blue Oyster Cult fame producing it. A lot of people just with that, you know, gave this album a lot of stick. But you know, as far as follow-up albums go, Give them Enough Rope is a really good follow-up record. Is it the first album? No, but come on, man. Safe European Home, English Civil War, Tommy Gun. Julie's Been Working for the Drug Squad. You know, Drug Starting Time, Stay Free. A lot of bands would kill to have that kind of quality. A lot of people mentioned this. I knew it was going to show up, and I was sitting on the fence with it for my first video. Elvis Costello, his first album is My Aim Is True, and it doesn't get much better than that. That is an extraordinary debut album. But his follow-up was also pretty extraordinary, and that is this year's Model. And a lot of people said this, and no, I really can't argue it because it's a phenomenal album. But this year's Model would be, you know, No Action, This Year's Girl, The Beat, Pump It Up, Little Triggers, You Belong to Me, Lip Service, Radio. Great follow-up album from his classic debut. Let's keep going. I'm a big Sheryl Crow fan. I was into her from day one. This was her debut album. Tuesday Night Music Club, a great debut album. Her second album was a self-titled Sheryl Crow album. I definitely thought about this big time in the other video because I really could have put this as a superior album than the debut. But it's close. It's really close. This was a great album, the second album. If It Makes You Happy, you know, Home. Lots and lots of great songs on the Sheryl Crow album. This is a cool version, by the way. This is called the Signature version with a live disc. But I'm a big fan of Sheryl Crow. I wanted to mention this one, and a lot of people might not agree totally. Almost like the Cars in a sense, and that's Dire Straits. You know, the first Dire Straits album is amazing to me. Revolutionary album, and if you know my channel, you know they're one of my favorite bands. A lot of people thought their second album, Communique, was a big disappointment, kind of a lesser version of the debut album, and to an extent, I wouldn't totally disagree. You know, all their albums, they would have a very different sound and change their sound, but Communique is still very much like the debut. But the problem is it as good as the debut? No. But is it still a really great record? I certainly think so. Here's Communique. You know, Lady Writer was kind of a rewrite of Sultans of Swing. It's not as good, but it's still great. You got News, Where Do You Think You're Going? It's a really strong record. Dire Straits, Communique, their kind of overlooked sometimes second album. The Eagles, well, their classic debut, had like 3 hit singles, everybody knows that. Their second album, commercially, originally was kind of a stiff, but it's a really great record for what it is, a thematic, almost concept album. We're talking about Desperado, a much more lush sound, a fine record. Eagles and Desperado, their second album. Foreigner, a couple people mentioned this one, and that's a really good choice. Their first album, Foreigner, is a classic. You know, right out of the box, they were huge. It feels like the first time, Cold as Ice, Star Rider. But their second album didn't dip in quality really at all, and may have sold more copies. If you know for sure, let me know. But, you know, Hot Blooded, Blue Morning, Blue Day, and of course the title track, Double Vision. Double Vision, a great follow-up from the first Foreigner record. Another person mentioned, what about Grand Funk? And I think you know that I am a Grand Funk fan. Really good choice. I'm kind of, to me, they're kind of equal. In fact, I may actually still like the debut better, but their debut was On Time. And this was that early, really rough, hard rockin' Grand Funk. And their second album, a lot of call the Red Album. This is their second album. Definitely no dip in quality from that first album. So Grand Funk, the Red Album, you know this one. Mr. Limousine Driver, In Need, Paranoid, and of course Inside Looking Out. Good choice, whoever had mentioned that. Another person had said, what about the Grateful Dead, man? What's your Grateful Dead selections? Good choice. I do prefer this debut Grateful Dead album. It's more, you know, it doesn't have that latter-day Grateful Dead experimentation for sure. But I like that debut album. The second one, of course, is Anthem of the Sun. And this is where you get into that more classic jammin', spacey Grateful Dead. That's it for the other one. And Cryptical Envelopment, right? What else was on here? Alligator, Born Cross-Eyed, that's a great one. Anthem of the Sun from the Grateful Dead. Heart. The debut is one of the greatest debuts of all time, in my opinion. I still listen to Dreamboat Annie. I love that album. But their second official album, now of course there's controversy because that magazine album was done by the record company, but the second official album released by the band Heart is, of course, Little Queen. And any album that's got Barracuda, Love Alive, Kick It Out, Little Queen, great follow-up from Heart. And probably a lot of people would consider this one of the greatest follow-ups of all time. Jimi Hendrix Experience. Of course, the debut album is Are You Experience? I don't think anything by Jimi Hendrix comes close to this album, so I certainly wouldn't put the follow-up as good. The follow-up being the classic Electric Ladyland. And, you know, what can you say? It's a classic album, classic double album, and a classic follow-up album from a great debut. Jimi Hendrix and Electric Ladyland. I don't know if people thought of this one, but I certainly did. Joe Jackson, his debut album was Look Sharp. What an amazing album that is. He did not disappoint with his second album, I'm the Man, with the title track, and On Your Radio, Kind of Cute, It's Different for Girls, Friday. Ooh, great stuff from Joe Jackson. What about Kiss? The debut album, the second album, Hotter Than Hell. With, of course, the title track, and I Got to Choose, and a bunch of other classics from early Kiss, Hotter Than Hell, great follow-up. Somebody had mentioned this album, and this is Little Feat, a band that I'm a really big fan of. Their debut album was not a huge hit. The follow-up was Sailing Shoes. Again, not a big hit. And in retrospect, you're probably right, whoever had mentioned that, because Easy to Slip, Cold, Cold, Cold. The greatest song, one of the greatest songs of all time, Willin', Tripe-Faced Boogie, Apolitical Blues. Yeah, I probably should have put this in better. The second album was probably better than the debut. Nice choice, whoever had mentioned that. I'm with you now. Lynyrd Skynyrd did not disappoint. Their first album, of course, is Pronounced. Lynyrd Skynyrd, a classic debut album. They didn't disappoint with their follow-up, Second Helping. A classic album, of course. Sweet Home Alabama, but just a ton of great classic tracks from the great Leonard Skynyrd. Let's keep going, shall we? Madonna. I was back in college when this thing came out, and the debut album, great debut album. I got it when it came out when I was in college. Her second album was Like a Virgin, and Like a Virgin had that big hit, and Material Girl, Love Don't Live Here Anymore, great track. Like a Virgin from Madonna, great follow-up. How about Molly Hatchet? Great debut album. I think their debut album is probably their best album. But their second album, I think, was even a bigger hit with the title track, Flirtin' with Disaster. A great follow-up from Molly Hatchet. One Man's Pleasure, Jukin' City Boogie No More. Lots of great stuff on that album. You know, I thought we were going to have room, but we're not even close. So we'll keep going. Somebody had mentioned this. I think it was Tom Petty. And Heartbreakers, I love the debut album. I remember when it came out with Breakdown and American Girl, Rockin' Around With You. I think that's a great debut album. But his follow-up, You're Gonna Get It, was pretty strong as well. I don't think it's nearly as good, in my opinion, as the debut, but certainly a really strong record from Tom Petty. Somebody had mentioned The Police. Absolutely. Outlandos de Amor, of course, was the debut with Roxanne and Can't Say I'm Losing You. I thought that was an amazing debut. The second album, Regardez Le Blanc, also a classic, but you could say that about all the Police albums. Message in a Bottle, great follow-up album for sure, The Police. This one I'm going to mention for sure, one of my all-time favorite bands, and the Pretenders' debut album, I think, is one of the greatest albums of all time. They're actually in my list of greatest albums of all time. Their second album, you know, didn't get nearly as good reviews, and it's not as good as the debut, but that's only because there's very few albums, in my opinion, that come close to the greatness of the debut from the Pretenders. Pretenders 2 is a great album. If Pretenders' debut didn't exist, this would be a killer debut album too. You know, The Adulteress, Bad Boys Could Say, Message Love, I Go to Sleep, Talk of the Town, Pack It Up, The English Roses, Louie Louie, great album. I thought some people would mention this, but they didn't. As far as I saw, Rainbow. Richie Blackmore's Rainbow. I really like this debut album, so I didn't put it in the other video. But most people consider this their best album, which is Rainbow Rising. I still actually prefer the debut, but that's just me. But a great follow-up for sure, Rainbow Rising from Rainbow. Another band that I think is extraordinary is REM. And REM had that classic debut, Murmur. Their second album was Reckoning. A great follow-up, South Central Rain. A lot of good, pretty Persuasion, Time After Time. Great stuff on this album. Santana. Their debut album, an all-time classic. This is what they call the Woodstock edition. But their second album was Abraxas. I mean, I think most bands would love to have an album as great as their second one. I mean, look, Black Magic Woman, Oye Como Va, Incident at Neshaber, Say a Cabo, Hope You're Feeling Better. Whew. Smoking follow-up. Paul Simon, his debut album was Paul Simon, and great record. But his second one was There Goes Rhymin' Simon, and boy, did that have a lot of great. American Tune, Loves Me Like a Rock, Take Me to the Mardi Gras, Love Me Like a Rock. Did I say that one? I said that one. Something So Right. Fine follow-up. Somebody mentioned Bruce Springsteen. Good choice, for sure. The debut, Greetings from Asbury Park. The second one, Innocent, The Wildly Innocent and the E Street Shuffle. For me, I still prefer the debut over this one. But yeah, great second album from the boss. Anybody think of Suede? A band that I love, pretty much unknown in the United States, but across the pond, huge. Talk about growth. Here's their debut album with So Young, Animal Nitrate, Moving, The Drowners. but their second album, totally different, right? I mean, the growth of this album, Dogman Star, big different than the debut. A great achievement from the Suede here, known as the London Suede in the United States. Go check out We Are the Pigs. You'll thank me. This is a great record from Suede. All right, Steve Harold, this one is for you. Great second albums. Got to have Van Halen, their classic debut. And I do think the debut is a stronger record. But Van Halen 2, huge. Great album, legendary album. And just chock full of classics, you know. Beautiful Girls, of course. Bottoms Up. You're No Good. Yep. Classic, for sure, from Van Halen. I don't know if anybody thought of this one, but I definitely would include this one. Paul Weller, I'm a huge fan of his debut album. Classic album, for sure. But his second album, solo record, was Wildwood. A magnificent album. Just tremendous, great achievement. I know back in that time, his debut album didn't get great reviews, but Wildwood did. I do think his debut is great too, but a phenomenal follow-up, Wildwood, from Paul Weller. And we got one more official one. Covered a lot of ground here, as you can see. I'm going to talk about Warren Zevon. This is his first official album. It's a great album. I love it. But the second official one is Excitable Boy. And this is the one that's got Johnny Strikes Up the Band, Roland the Headless, Thompson, Gunner, Excitable Boy, Werewolves of London, Accidentally Like a Martyr, Lawyers, Guns, and Money. Yeah, maybe I should have put this in that other video, huh? What a follow-up from Warren Zevon. I'm going to mention one more. If you know my channel, I'm a fan of the Knack. It's not cool to be a fan of the Knack, but I remember when the Knack first came out, and they were a critics band. They were a rock stars band. Everybody thought they were amazing. Bruce Springsteen, Tom Petty, you name it. Everybody wanted to come out and jam with the Knack when they were playing in the clubs in Los Angeles. And then they got signed and released their first album, Get the Knack, which of course is an amazingly great power pop album. It still sounds great. But due to other circumstances, you know, the media started to hate them. Doug Feiger kind of has an obnoxious personality, maybe got a little too cocky, and some people thought they were trying to come off as the Beatles. And then they released their second album. This is a Japanese vinyl import, But the Little Girls Understand. And this album got trashed. It had no hope of ever making it with the critics. And the album crashed and burned, and that was pretty much the end of them. It didn't help that the debut single from the second album was Baby Talk Sturdy, kind of a rewrite of My Sharona. But the reality is, these are sister albums. They were recorded at the same time, and the Knack actually wanted it to be a double album, but the record company said no way. This is actually a great album. This is actually probably just about as good as this album. They just had so many great songs. End of the Game, How Can Love Hurt So Bad, Having a Rave Up, Mr. Handyman, Can't Put a Price on Love, Hold On Tight, Don't Let Go. Man, it's just great. It didn't help that Baby Talks Dirty was his first single, and didn't help that everybody started hating Doug Feiger. It's a shame. But special mention to But the Little Girls Understand from the Knack. So there you go. How long am I doing this video? 23 minutes. We just covered 38 albums. I think I covered a lot of great second albums that didn't disappoint after their debut albums by these bands. Let me know what I missed. Have I missed anything? I'm sure I have. Let me know. As always, I really appreciate you watching my channel. I love your comments. I appreciate your loyalty. It's so much fun for me to share my collection. As you know from my channel, it's all about physical media. I never just show pictures and Wikipedia. This is about me and my collection and me knowing this stuff intimately. So glad you're enjoying it. I hope you're enjoying it. If you're new to my channel, hit subscribe. Check out my other videos. And as always, stay safe, stay healthy. Have a great weekend. Tomorrow's Super Bowl Sunday here in the United States. So party down. Have a great time, and I'll see you next time on the Alan Rosenberg Show.